You're listening to a 4x4 Radio Network podcast.
The 4x4 Podcast, episode 143.
You're listening to the 4x4 Podcast, the podcast all about four-wheeling, overlanding, off-road racing, and the outdoor lifestyle. We talk about news, tips and tricks, answer your questions, and interview big and little names in the off-roading world. So whether your rig is busted and you're in the shop wrenching on it or on your way to the trail, join us and we'll keep you plugged in on topics to help you get away. Here's your host, Dan.
What is up, guys? This is just me this time. Couldn't get Rich and Craig on just because of scheduling issues. But it has been such a long time since we have released an episode that I really wanted to get this one out, especially since this is another one of those interviews that I have had sitting on the hard drive for a number of months, long overdue for getting released. So this episode, we have a special interview with Eric from Roxor. You've heard us talk about Roxor in the past. This is the side-by-side that looks a lot like an old CJ, looks almost identical to the CJ, actually, and it's unlike any other side-by-side or UTV that's out there. But before we get to that interview, I just want to let you know that this episode of the 4x4 Podcast is brought to you by LT Wright Knives. These heirloom-quality pieces will outlast your adventure, so plan well, drive safely, and carry an LT Wright knife. To find out more, go online to ltwrightknives.com. All right, well, without any further ado, let's go ahead and get to that interview. Tonight on the podcast, I have Eric Anderson from Roxor. How are you doing tonight?
Great, Dan. Thanks for having me.
Oh, I'm really glad to have you on because I've been very interested in the Roxor since its announcement. But before we go into the Roxor, I want to back up a little bit, talk about some of your background, and then we'll get into the parent company of Roxor, Mahindra, because a lot of people don't know much about that. So what's your background in off-roading like?
Gosh, my parents took me to Baja in the 60s in a vintage Land Rover, and I've been driving and riding motorcycles and four-wheel drives off-road ever since, and lived in Africa, ridden across the Sahara solo, been a motocross rider and racer around the world, and hey, I even speak Swahili, so if you want to take a Roxor to Africa, I'm your guy.
That would be a really interesting proposition. I know we do have some listeners in South Africa and some South African listeners abroad that listen, so maybe they'll have to take you up on that. But that's a really cool off-roading history. You don't hear many people with that kind of legacy built into off-roading.
And I've always been a speed freak, and I've raced Baja 1000 many times, and raced motocross and enduro and motorcycle rallies. But the Roxor is a much slower experience. I mean, this is something where you can really just have fun driving and off-roading and exploring, and it's not about jumping sand dunes or catching big air. This is just about the fun of shifting a manual transmission in a four-wheel drive vehicle and just enjoying the outdoors.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's a very eye-catching vehicle. So let's transition here and talk a little bit about Mahindra. That's not a company that most of our North American listeners are familiar with, but you guys are pretty large on the global scale. Can you tell me a little bit about your parent company?
Yeah, Mahindra got its start in 1947. Willis Overland, believe it or not, gave them a license to build off-road vehicles after the war in the Pacific Rim, and that includes the Korean War and later Vietnam. So they've been building these kinds of vehicles for 75 years. And, now it's a $20 billion a year company. They are the world's largest tractor manufacturer by volume, not by dollars. So some of the Americans have seen or heard of Mahindra tractors here in the U.S. There are quite a few dealers out there, but our Roxor dealers are part of what's called Mahindra Automotive. We're a different company, and Mahindra Automotive is headquartered in Auburn Hills, Michigan. And we're part of the Mahindra company that also builds SUVs overseas and in India. It's based in India. They build airplanes They build all sorts of military vehicles. They have their own financing corporation, hospitality, and all sorts of stuff. So they also are e-racers. I don't know whether you know what Formula E is, but Mahindra's put a lot of investment into electric vehicles, including electric scooters, one of which is called Gen Z, available here in the U.S. So they're in a lot of places that Americans might not notice, but you're starting to hear more about them now.
Oh, yeah, no kidding. Because, the Roxor has really grabbed the attention of a lot of people because I guess we can start describing it, and we have talked about it a little bit on the podcast, is that at first glance, it looks exactly like a CJ.
And that's part of its heritage, its legendary and iconic shape. We used to build for those, and those kinds of bodies are just flat fenders and flat sides and super simple body styles that are made out of really steel. This is a steel frame on this thing, a boxed frame, and turbo diesel engine too. But before I get into any of the specs, the full circle story on Mahindra was interesting because now the fellow who's in charge, Mr. Anand Mahindra, in charge of this $20 billion corporation, his great-grandfather got his start with Willys Overland with a license back in 47. It's no longer in force now, but we don't need the license to build the Roxor machines. We do have some agreements in place with FCA and on the grill. Those were all settled in 2009. But what's the full circle story is that now Anand Mahindra is investing $1 billion in Michigan, back to where the company got its roots 75 years ago, and building factories and training Indian engineers on the American methods for designing and building automobiles back in India. So there's a story you haven't heard before, is India's outsourcing to America.
That's so counter to what most people would imagine, or at least everybody that's called into customer service somewhere.
Well, Michigan's, and Detroit especially, is sort of the hotbed and talent pool for the automotive world. And Mahindra's even bought Pininfarina. And if you're a car guy, you know them as the design firm in Italy that has designed, so many Italian cars, including Lamborghinis. So they're part of our portfolio and are helping to design many of the vehicles of the future. And we even have a bid in with U.S. Postal Service to replace the postal trucks.
Oh, yeah, that would be great because those things are long overdue.
Yes, they are.
And it's interesting you mentioned the Formula E because I know some of our listeners are also Formula One fans, and there's a lot of crossover. And so that's really exciting to see what is taking place with Formula E and how that's kind of trickling down to other sectors of the automotive industry.
Yeah, it's interesting. Now some of the electric cars are faster than internal combustion. Obviously, they don't have the range, but the power-to-weight ratio and the accelerations are greater than some of those V8, V10 engines, that were, or even twin turbocharged V6s. These electric machines are stinking fast.
Oh, yeah. All of the torque on demand from the very bottom of the throttle. Like, that's amazing.
Yeah. The only difference is they're quiet.
Oh, yeah. Yep. All right. So let's talk a little bit about the Roxor, because from everything that I've seen and read is that you guys are not making a street legal machine. So it's kind of matched up against the UTVs and side-by-sides, but that's about where the comparisons stop, because fundamentally it looks like the Roxor is different than all of those side-by-sides.
It is different, and we've kind of nailed it down to six different ways, and it is classified as a side by side. It doesn't have street legal airbags and 5-mile-an-hour bumpers, and it doesn't comply to federal motor vehicle safety standards. So it's off road only, and because it's a diesel, it doesn't have an engine restriction on the definition of a side by side or an ORV. If it were an internal combustion gas engine, they're limited to 1,000 cc's, but because it's diesel, there's no limit. So we fit in with that category. We're for sale in power sports stores or motorcycle UTV stores. But some of the main differences is ours is a steel body and UTVs are a plastic body. we've got a boxed steel frame that could be dropped from the Empire State Building and not be damaged, as opposed to a unibody or an aluminum body. Our engine's a turbo diesel 4-cylinder versus a vertical twin gas engine. Our transmission is automotive style 5-speed transmission with a 2-speed transfer box, unlike a belt drive or a CVT on a UTV, which is one of their weaknesses if you're really using something industrially, or on the ranch or on the farm or hauling big trailers. The belt tends to be a weak point, and it'll glaze or get hot or smoke or break, and then you've got a challenge on your hand. And then also, fifth big reason is our vehicle's already got big wheels and tires. BFG Goodrich all-terrain tires on them, big disc brakes, 11-inch front disc brakes, and automotive drum brakes on the back. And the tow capacity on the thing, this is where we really shine.
Oh, yeah.
Torque. 3,490 pounds of towing capacity. So that's where we really start to shine above and beyond the UTVs. And we're industrial strength. We're heavier, and we're a little slower, and we don't have the huge range of motion and suspension travel that some of the other monster machines have. But as I said earlier, this isn't built for that. This is something that's going to last generations. In fact, leave it in your will to your grandchildren.
Yeah, this looks very stoutly constructed. And really, I think if the Roxor were introduced a couple decades ago, there's no reason that it wouldn't be street legal, because essentially it's the same as most of the old CJs.
Well, yeah, we keep it simple. We've kept it simple. We haven't overcomplicated it, but where I think we're also really starting to differentiate ourselves is to have a ton of accessories. So you can go online at roxoroffroad.com on the website and build yourself a Roxor by just clicking and dragging on any of the accessories you want, any of the colors that you want. Right now we're available in 6 colors with 4 different camouflage wraps from real tree and mossy oak, but there's going to be hundreds of colors available here in the near future where you'll be able to just build whatever you want. And we want seat covers to match, fine, we can do that. And this is a body and a style that's not going to change every 3 to 5 years, so the tooling costs won't be amortized into expensive parts that we're going to try and sell. If you bend a fender on this, it's really inexpensive to replace.
Yeah, that is if you don't just want to bang it back into shape, whereas, a UTV, that fender's going to crack and disappear. You're not going to be able to fix that.
It's funny you say that, because, it's really hard to break one of these things anywhere. You can bend it, but it all bends back. And we had an incident during one of our filming episodes outside of Bend, Oregon, where one of the drivers was driving through what he thought was a tumbleweed, but it had about a half-ton boulder hidden inside.
Oh, no.
It pinch flatted the whole BFG tire, completely destroyed it, just put holes right through it. I've never seen that happen. Bent the leaf spring into a 90-degree bend, tacoed the shock absorber, and then the steering link and the sway bar were all tweaked and bent too. I ran into town, got a new tire and a shock that was the same length eye to eye. We turned the leaf spring upside down and drove a Ford truck over it and bent it back. And then we used the hydraulic lift on the back of the photo van to bend the other 2 pieces straight. And we were running inside of 70 minutes. We were an hour and 10 minutes. The thing was back in front of the video camera, and we were filming again with the drone.
That is remarkable.
It's sort of super interesting. You watch the Indians drive some of these things. It's got a cousin in India called a Thar, Thar, named after the Thar Desert. And you can Google that too if you want. But they beat these things. They have really tough roads, hard roads, and rough roads in India. And its cousin really gets a workout, and you can see how they damage them, but field repair them with very few tools. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, that's how a lot of it is in the global markets, where if it's not field serviceable, then it's just not going to last, and it doesn't hang around. So, yeah, I just looked up the Thar Desert. That's one that I was not familiar with, but that looks pretty rugged.
Yeah, and there's a Thar Adventure At some point in the future, I'm going to go take one of the Thar adventures in India and then bring some of those guys over, and we'll show them some of the iconic and legendary adventures here in North America. We just finished the Pony Express tour across northern Nevada and a couple Roxors for Four Wheeler Magazine. That video is available through Four Wheeler, and we've got our own video that's going to pop on the website here pretty quick, and articles in our Roxor Adventure magazine about it. But we'll be doing other things like the Mojave Road and Continental Divide, and back east is the Hatfield-McCoy Trail area. Someday, if I have the time, I've done this before, the Trans Am Trail across America. It's 4,750 miles of dirt. You can cross this country by dirt from eastern Tennessee to Port Orford, Oregon.
Yep.
And it's a phenomenal adventure. It just takes a lot of time. It's at least 3 to 4 weeks of nonstop off-road driving.
Oh, yeah. We have a listener, actually, from the UK that came over with a motorcycle, shipped it over here, and then did the entire Trans Am Trail before heading back to the UK. So I had a chance to link up with him, and he told me all of his experiences on that trail. Just phenomenal. It's really cool to see a vehicle that is capable of doing that. It's such really a low cost for what it is. But let's talk a little more about the specs. So we talked about the steel body, the boxed frame. Is this something that was adapted from the previous work with Willys and Jeep, or is this something that was designed specific for that vehicle?
No, it's our own design, as are some of these things. They're evolutions in progress from the 70s and the 80s, and I think a lot of folks recognize this. We are actually here in Las Vegas right now at the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation Cowboy Christmas. We're displaying all of our Roxors in front of cowboys and ranchers. There's an indoor rodeo going on just around the corner from me right now, and the ranchers, lots of big belt buckles and big hats here and pointy tip boots, and they just love this thing because it's so stout. And it does have heritage back to the flat fendered, Willis machines in the late 40s, and it's evolved since then. So it's an amazing little vehicle, and it is incredibly durable. The boxed steel frame, it's not a C channel. This is fully boxed.
Yeah.
And there's no way you could probably twist it or damage it, but it would be hard to do.
Yeah. It'd be tough to walk away from something like that. But, I'm looking at roxoroffroad.com right now, so I got a good visual of what everything looks like. And there's a picture with the body and the engine removed anyway. So you see the boxed steel frame, the axles, the transmission, transfer case, and it looks basically identical to the old CJs and what they look like. So
a lot of the guys we exhibited at the Bantam Jeep Festival. The Bantam, I think his brothers kind of came up with the Jeep concept even before Willis was building it. They just didn't have the production capacity for World War II. But this is all goes back to those days, and it has evolved. I can't tell you that they're replaceable or identical, but they all have a common heritage. They go back that far, and this is just modernized. We call it neo-retro. There's a lot of retro aspects about this thing, and design and in the feel and in the look of it, but there's a lot of newness to it too. So there may be some new tabs on that frame and a new updated steering box, and they're not Dana 44 axles, but they're Dana-like because they were related to that. But I think the splines are different, so not a lot of interchangeable parts necessarily.
Okay, yeah, that's kind of what I was going to ask.
We have a lot of the those Jeep fanatics say, "Well, gosh, I could buy this for $16,000 and it'd be a cheaper investment than buying a used '80s CJ." And go hunting with it or use it on the farm, and it's a better investment because it's brand new, and I don't have to put another $2,000 into it or $5,000 into it and do any restoration because it's brand new. It is off-road only, but that rolling chassis you're looking at, we've got it right here in our booth with the engine and drivetrain installed in it, and it's one of the more popular visuals that we have when we're out on the road, because you really start to understand how this is built versus a standard UTV that's just got an aluminum tube frame or a monocoque frame with plastic body parts on it.
They're absolutely and fundamentally different. There's I don't know how anybody could compare the two, unless it was just the fact that it's not road legal and that's about it. But in a lot of states, it seems like the side-by-sides and UTVs are getting licensed. So I noticed as I was going through the accessories page, you can get a windshield kit, you can get the side mirrors. I didn't see like a turn signal indicator kit. Maybe I'd missed it, but I'm sure somebody's making one.
Yeah, we don't condone that at all. This is built strictly for off-road use only. I know some of those states, even like my home state in Nevada, will allow a agricultural vehicle, a tractor, or UTV to get from one field to the next, or one trailhead to the next, and there are restrictions on that. You can't go buy groceries at the store or stop off at church or anything in them or you'll get ticketed. But this is off-road only. We don't condone it for road use at all. And I know some states are allowing some of that kind of travel for hunters or farmers or ranchers. But this is I'll be clear, off-road only.
Okay. Well, that's very cool. So let's talk a little bit about the engine. Here at the 4x4 podcast, we're all big fans of diesel engines. So this is very cool. But I know some of the challenges with off-roading a turbo engine can be a little frustrating. If you're trying to have a lot of control when you're crawling, that turbo lag can really kind of jump up and surprise you when it finally that turbo does kick in. What kind of horsepower numbers and torque numbers are really the important one for that diesel engine?
Well, it's got a fairly low boost. This is an engine that puts out a throbbing 62 horsepower and 144 foot-pounds of torque. So, and you got a 5-speed manual transmission. So, and it's speed limited to 45 if it's a 2018. The 2019s will be speed limited at 55 miles an hour.
Okay,
it's pretty hard to get into fifth gear in high range, but you put it in low range, and like you've experienced before, it'll climb a telephone pole if it gets traction.
Yeah.
And this is where I have not noticed any turbo lag at all. You can hear the little wastegate spool up or and it's a cool little sound. But this has been a really well proven engine by Mahindra. I think it's very closely related, if not the same, as the Thar in India. So it's been built and tuned for off-roading and SUV, and here in the U.S., of course, it's off-road only. But it's an incredible little power plant, and in low range, this thing will pull stumps. It really will turn the earth backwards and prolong the sunset.
Yeah, that's really good to hear. That it's a new engine to the U.S. market, but it's not new. We've talked about that a little before, like with the new Ford Ranger that's coming out. It's new to everybody here in North America, but it's been sold in Australia and South America for over a decade, and basically the same drivetrain and body configuration. So when you can take a power plant and drivetrain like that, that's been well tested and refined, and then drop it into a new market, we are really getting the benefit of that because all the kinks and bugs are already worked out. We just have a fine product that's ready to go to work. Right.
Well, and this thing too, with the transmission that's attached to it, it is industrial strength. I mean, I've got an editor flying out to Reno. 5-6 days from now, and she's a young woman who's never driven a stick shift before, and the adventure and theme of her story is to learn to drive a stick, which you and I probably called millennial anti-theft devices. It's a joke, but she is excited to learn how to drive a stick, and then we're taking her on an adventure to go explore some ghost towns and find some herds of wild Mustang out there in the Great Basin. And she's just pumped, and I know for a fact, and she'll be shifting gears in 20 minutes. You start in low range, you don't even need to put your foot on the throttle. At idle, it will inch away, and I call it chugging. The sweet spot on RPM band is 11 or 1200 RPM. You can short shift this all day. It's quiet, it's comfortable, and it's easy to drive. It's the easiest stick I think anybody could drive.
Yeah, that's how I taught my oldest when she was 9. I put her behind the steering wheel of my Jeep, and I put it in 4-low, and I said, check it out. You just let this pedal out, and you're going. You can't stall the thing.
Yeah, perfect. I bet the smile on her face was a mile wide.
Oh, yeah, she still smiles whenever she talks about that with her friends. Like, what 9-year-old has been able to drive? Not many of them. So... Well, so we talked a little bit. What's the price point that we're looking at for the Roxor, and how does that compare against some of the competitors in terms of side-by-sides?
Sure. Well, the starting MSRP on these run around $15,900, and they're basic, they're utilitarian, but we have a slew of accessories that can get the price up into the 18,900, even 19,000, depending upon how many of those accessories you want to install. And on the website, roxoroffroad.com, is a configurator where you can click and build and add those accessories, and it'll give you a line list along with the MSRP and the price of what you've added. And if you need a pintle trailer hitch, you need a skid plate, you need some kind of a soft top or a full enclosure. We've got defrosters and heaters now. We've got worn freewheeling hubs up front, aux lockers for the differentials if you want, or if you really need it into some kind of really tough rock crawling kind of stuff. We've got a ton of accessories, and I add some of my own stuff. I've got my shovels and high lift jack mounts on the roll bars on the back, and we just are starting to reveal probably a new accessory every week on the website.
Very cool. Yeah. So just for fun, I went and looked on the Facebook Marketplace just to compare if I were to go out and buy a CJ7 or a CJ5 right now that is in the same working condition where I don't have to invest a bunch of sweat equity. I'm easily paying more than that for a Roxor.
Right.
And you still got to go through and work out the kinks because it's a used vehicle.
Yeah.
Here's one over 80,000 miles on it, and you're still not getting the same type of vehicle. So.
Right. And, we can pretty much guarantee 100% spare parts supply because our factory and assembly area, we actually assemble them right in Auburn Hills, Michigan. And we've got all the parts because we're assembling them there. The parts that are imported from India are the frame, the drivetrain and axles, and the steel body. And there's so many other things are built there in Michigan, including the roll bar, the paint from PPG, the BFG Goodrich tires, the American wheels, the Grant steering wheels, the grips, the rubber parts, the rubber coating on the inside of the bed and all the surface area, the wiring looms, the seats themselves, all of that's made in Michigan. So we've got 450 people employed there at Mahindra Automotive North America now. We've employed a lot of vets too. We've hired vets, and we're the first OEM to open a new factory in the Detroit area in 25 years.
Wow, that's amazing.
It's quite an operation, and if any of you or your listeners want to stop by and get a quick factory tour in Auburn Hills, look us up.
Oh, that'd be a great opportunity. Hopefully somebody takes you up on that. So I guess just to kind of wrap us up, where should somebody go if they want to learn more about the Roxor and maybe see one in person?
We've got 300 dealers nationwide. We've been in 49 states. We're still waiting for California on the California Air Resources Board to issue a certification. We're in compliance of all those every Air Resources Board standards for air and air quality emissions, but we're just working through the paperwork now. But those 300 dealers can be found on Roxor, ROXOR, offroad.com. Roxor, by the way, is a palindrome, if you know what that is. If you do cross, it reads the same backwards as forwards, and any word with X in the middle or sounds like rocks is kind of cool. So we really are excited about that name. But there's so much going on that website, and just today we popped up our new Roxor Adventure magazine, which you can subscribe to free. Just pop your email address in there. It's a quarterly publication and tells you everything about what we're doing, along with videos that exciting adventure videos. We've done all sorts of interesting stuff with, chainsaw laborers, horse ranch owners, explorers across the Pony Express Trail, and take a look at some of the fun videos and content on that website. I think you'll enjoy it. And the Roxor Adventure magazine's a fun read too.
Oh yeah, I'm going to subscribe tonight. Hopefully get one here soon. Awesome.
Yeah, I think it popped up. It popped up on the website when I looked at it this morning, and that was just added today, in fact.
Awesome. All right, Eric. Well, thanks again for your time, and I really look forward to whenever our paths do cross. Hopefully, maybe in the Johnson Valley area or anywhere down here in the off-roading mecca that is Southern California. Explore some trails.
Yeah. Please send me your phone number if it's not on the email, and we'll get you to driving a Roxor.
Excellent. All right, Eric. Thanks again for your time, and we'll talk to you later.
Dan, thanks so much. See ya.
All right, Eric. Thanks for spending a little bit of time here. Sorry it took so long to get this interview released. However, I am really looking forward to whenever we can link up on the trails, because I would really love to see one of the Roxors in action. All right, I'm not going to go into any of the reviews or feedback or the other emails that we've received. We'll save that for another show. But again, just want to say thanks to LT Wright Knives for supporting the show. Not only does LT Wright Knives make great knives of their own design, they make knives from other companies too. LT and the crew have made knives for Chris Tanner at Prepared Mind 101, and his JX2 and JX3 models are quite popular. Those were some that I've actually looked at very closely, and they are very nice. That's something that I could, if I got the right color, could fit right in with my military apparel that I wear on a daily basis. So other fan favorite models that LT produces are the Gary Wines Bushcrafter and Bushcraft Hunter, designed by former SAS Armorer Gary Wines. These are very stout bush knives in a Scandi grind. And, as I go through telling you about the LT Wright knives and everything, there's a lot of jargon and lingo that you may not fully understand. But here in the very near future, I'm going to sit down with LT or one of the other members from the LT Wright Knife crew, and we're going to dig into some of these and learn a little bit more about what all we're talking about, like a Scandi grind. Let's see. We've also dealt with Ben's Backwoods or Lester River Bushcraft. They have great websites, and LT makes the Lagom, the Kamrat, and the Leuku models for them. These are also O1 Scandi ground knives, but with a unique design. The Lagom and his smaller brother, the Kamrat, have very comfortable handles that will allow you to carve and work with them all day long. If you need a larger camp knife in the Scandi grind with a 9-inch blade, the Leuku will get the job done for you every time. LT's most recent collaboration with EC Knives is the V2 Collective. The sweeping blade has a Scandi grind of a 1/8-inch A2 steel, nicely curved micarta handle. The V2 Collective is a unique knife that will tick a lot of boxes for your knife lovers. These are just a few of the knives LT Wright Knives collaborates on. These heirloom quality pieces will outlast your adventure. So plan well, drive safely, and carry an LT Wright knife. Find out more online at ltwrightknives.com. Also, in addition to LT Wright Knives supporting the show, it is supported by listeners like you who go to Amazon and use our link. Go to the 4x4podcast.com/Amazon and just shop like you normally will. And Amazon's going to throw a couple cents our direction every month. And like I said, it's a very small amount, but we really appreciate everybody that uses that because that does help offset the cost of hosting the podcast episodes, the media files, and the website. And even if we don't get an episode out, there's still costs incurring to make sure those files stay available and the website's maintained. So just want to say thanks for using that link, the 4x4podcast.com/Amazon. And lastly, if you want to head over to 4x4radio.com, you'll find a playlist there with all the shows on the 4x4 Radio Network. You can just hit play there and listen to the Center Steer podcast, learn about Land Rovers. We've got the Jeep Talk Show. You can learn about all things Jeep related. We've got On the Trail with Kevin and Scott, and also the Trail Chasers. They've been doing a lot of cool stuff over there. Man, the trail chasers have been going to a bunch of the events that I haven't been able to attend due to work scheduling. But again, thanks for everybody that sent us emails. We've got some really good ones that we want to talk about here when I've got Craig and Rich on the show. If you want to send us a message, you can do that on email at the 4x4podcast@yahoo.com. We're on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter at the 4x4 podcast there. And if you want to leave a voicemail, you can send that on the phone like a regular person does. Call 719-924-5337. Or if you want to get fancy and send a high-quality message, you can email that audio file using a voice memo app from your smartphone, or just use the SpeakPipe tool that you can find online at our website. And you can find all of that and the links to everything we're discussing in this show at the 4x4podcast.com/143. And I've mentioned it in the past, but I'll remind you, if you want to share just this podcast episode, and skip through all the nonsense of sending a friend to a website to click a button or whatever, you can just send them the direct link to this podcast file is the 4x4podcast.com/143mp3. When they click on that link that you sent them, it'll just take them right to that file. It'll automatically start, and they can stream it right there. Even then decide later on that they can subscribe through iTunes or any of the other podcasting services that are out there, whether it's iHeartRadio or Stitcher or whatever it is. So just want to say thanks for sharing that with your friends. But for now, it's time to hit the trails. So God bless, tread lightly, and stay safe out there while exploring your world.